You're listening to the Investor Success Podcast, the hit weekly show featuring inspiring stories to help real estate entrepreneurs do more deals while increasing their cash flow and their net worth. And that is exactly what we're going to talk about today as we dig in the right way to get your landlording done. Don't make the mistakes I made when I was in my early 20s, because I didn't have this podcast to help me out. My name is Jim Ingersoll, and I am your host for this podcast today. I'm also the founder of the Investor Success Mastermind. You can learn more about that at investorsuccessmastermind.com. Pick up your free real estate kit today. Go to www.bigmoneyinvestor.com. I created this podcast several months ago to help motivate and inspire you to take massive action and to build your business and your life the right way. And that plays right into our topic on being a great and successful landlord today. I want to welcome you to our show today. If you're a regular Success listener, I want to give you a big special welcome back. Can you guys do me a huge favor? Leave me a comment, leave me a like, or leave me a review in iTunes, or share this, do something. I would really appreciate it. Those of you guys that are tuning in today for the very first time, I want to give you a huge welcome as well. Hope you go and check out all the other episodes also. We've got a fantastic show lined up for you today that you're going to absolutely love. You're going to learn so much. You're going to want to listen to this one twice. You're going to absolutely love our guest, John, today, because he's got some phenomenal information. Let me tell you a little bit about our guest here. As a broker and an investor back in New York, up in Long Island, John has been involved with rentals and investment properties since 1979. Besides owning and operating two real estate businesses, he's also the president and the founder of the Landlord Protection Agency, which you're going to absolutely love getting to know. It's an organization that specializes in helping landlords and property managers avoid the hurdles and the pitfalls and the really expensive blunders common when dealing with tenants. And those of you guys that know my story, when I started in my early 20s, that's exactly what it was for me. It was hurdles, pitfalls, and expensive blunders. You're going to be able to shortcut all of my mistakes today. In 2010, John also created the tenant screening service called Quick Check Credit Reports, and more recently, to help landlords collect from ex-tenants, the Landlord Collection Agency for tenant debt reporting. John, welcome to the Investor Success Podcast today. It's nice to have you along.
Thanks so much, Jim, and what a great introduction. It's an honor and a privilege to join you here, so thanks so much for inviting me.
Well, this has been a passion of yours for a long time, hasn't it?
Oh, it really has, and before it became a passion of mine, I had some experiences to go through, and like you mentioned in my introduction, I got started in 1979, pretty much right out of high school, and I didn't know what I was doing. I got licensed as a real estate agent, and then I soon became a licensed broker, and I was in my early 20s and was learning lessons the hard way, first as a real estate agent and then helping my father as a property manager, and because I liked rentals. One of the reasons I liked rentals so much in the beginning, before I had my own rental properties, was because they were quick and easy for me to make a quick rental fee. Because up in Long Island, the tenant pays the rental fee, and it's usually in cash. And that's the way, I made quick money in the very beginning. So I listed and sold houses and all that, but rentals were fun because no one had to apply for a mortgage, and as a real estate agent, you pretty much know you've made a deal right away. You don't have to wait for the whole family to come back and look at the rental unit and apply for financing or anything. So it was pretty quick and easy. So that's why I did a lot of rentals. And in 1984, I started my own office called Rentals Only Realty. So I had two offices, one for sales and one for only rentals. And Rentals Only Realty got me a lot of landlords. So besides helping my father manage his properties and starting to buy my own, I was helping many, many other landlords manage their properties and find tenants for them. And because of seeing the landlord side of things, I was able to identify them. And I started calling Rentals Only Realty, my own business, I started calling it Long Island's Landlord Protection Agency because I kind of self-appointed myself to be the protector of all these other landlords who were victims of bad tenants, and not only bad tenants, but also other real estate agents that were looking for that rental fee really quickly, like I was. I was looking for a quick rental fee, but I didn't want to burn the landlord in it by sticking them with a bad tenant. So I was trying to educate people, and I started ordering credit reports for people. So I had a guy who was a private detective on Long Island who had access to credit reports. So I would, to get more landlords to sign up and list their rentals with my office, I would advertise free credit report when you rent with Rentals Only Realty. So that's really how I learned a lot about tenant screening, but not enough. Like you, in my early 20s, I was very excited and eager, and my mom bought me a book right after I was married. She bought me the book Nothing Down by Robert Allen.
Oh, yeah.
And that really got me so excited about investing and learning creative ways to buy. And so I started making offers all over the place, and I finally started actually getting my own properties. But boy, did I not know what I was in for, because I was learning.
Yeah, exactly. And I was working full-time as an engineer, so my property management philosophy was I would work all day, show the place on my way home from work or whatever, and the first person who showed up with a pulse and a deposit, well, you were in. And then all hell would break loose from there. Because,
exactly.
and then I have to evict them, and I certainly didn't do that right. I had people threaten me. I threw people out, and it was like every possible thing that could go wrong went wrong. And it's because I didn't have any training. I didn't have anybody to lean on. The internet wasn't around back then. This was probably around late 80s, early 90s. And so, I learned by trial and fire. Most of it was fire. And that problem landlording cost me 10 years of investing, because my wife made me swear. She said, Jim, swear to me we will never be landlords again. That's how ugly it was, right? So it took 10 years to convince her to come back in. Yeah, it can be. So you got to get this stuff right.
Yeah.
You got to get this stuff
so
right.
Important. And in order to do that, we have to go, like you said, trial and fire. We have to get through that part where we have our experiences and learn. And unfortunately, sometimes it's the hard way and the expensive way. Same thing happened to me in the late 80s. Things kind of caved in for me, where I had some rental properties, and Jeannie, my wife, got sick, and she was diagnosed with a few different chronic illnesses, which she still suffers from now. And all those years ago, it was a big thing because we didn't know what was going on, and we were scared. And we had the 3 kids back then; they were little, so I had to be Mr. Mom for over a year. And during this time, I had tenants in these properties, and I didn't know all the ins and outs of managing my own tenants. It was great to manage other people's tenants and stuff like that, but dealing with my own tenants was a different story. And I had all the responsibility. And when they didn't want to pay, it seemed like Murphy's Law. When, what can go wrong will go wrong at the worst possible time. And I had all my tenants not paying me rent at the same time, and it caused me to lose properties. And it was really a very rough time. But like my nephew says, when life gives you lemons, throw them at people. He says throw them at people.
I like that.
But then he said, and aim for their head.
Yeah. Aim for their head. There you go. Knock them out. There you go. That's a good idea. And what I've learned is the mistake I made wasn't the mistake. The mistake I made was not having the right people in my life to help, encourage, train, mentor, all that stuff. But the problem is it cost me 10 years trying to convince my wife to come back in, and that's too long. When you make a mistake, you got to get right back on your feet and get moving right away, because we all make them.
I know. Well, after a big
the key is to get going again. Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, it's so important, and the sooner you get going, the better. For me, I was kind of fortunate. The last house we were losing at the time we were living in, and what I wound up doing, which is a really kind of crazy thing, but I wound up discovering what I called at the time pre-foreclosures, because I was one of them.
There you go.
And the pre-foreclosure, they call them short sales now, you know.
Right.
And I was negotiating with the bank as a real estate broker. They didn't even realize I'm the same guy who's losing the house.
That's funny.
And I was able to get the same house at a much lower price than I owed on the mortgage. So that was an amazing experience. It took a long time to do, but I learned about those pre-foreclosures, and then I started teaching a lot of other people to do them too, and it opened up a whole new way to buy properties for me too.
Oh, I bet.
So in a way, it was a little bit of lemonade there.
Let me ask you this, John. You've been doing this a long time successfully as well. What do you feel is the biggest key factor in your success as a landlord or as a property manager?
Well, there's a couple of things, but experience is a great teacher, and like I remember from Robert Allen from the Challenge Experience, which I attended in 1987, and one of the things that I always remembered and stuck with me is there is no failure. As long as you learn from your experience and can move forward, it's not really a failure. And I've had to have a lot of experiences that most people would consider failures, but if we are able to learn from it and move forward in a positive way, and maybe it's kind of like how we developed our LPA lease. And I had a basic lease template years and years ago, but every time I had a bad experience, and it was probably because of my failure to prepare for those happenings. I learned to put a new clause in the lease to protect me from something like that happening again, and that was a long time over the years developing that lease agreement. But it was an ongoing process, and it still is. But I learned to eliminate the F word, which is fear.
Yes, it is. That dirty four-letter. You and I hate that dirty four-letter F word. Fear.
That's right.
F-E-A-R. It crushes opportunities and will hold you back from the real F word, which is freedom. So get over it and move on. And you've got a great website. Now we just want to direct all of our success listeners to www.thelpa, THELPA, and LPA simply stands for Landlord Protection Agency. Right. So everyone should check that out. Can you tell us a little bit about tenant screening? Because I know I watch all your quotes and social media, and people should connect in with you. But you've got that one image where it says like 98% of all tenant problems are caused by lack of screening, right?
Right. I say they can be eliminated in the screening process.
Yes, that's it. Yes, I
got another. Oh, thank you. That's one of my favorites. And another one I have that I'll just mention is the best way to avoid tenant problems is to avoid problem tenants. It's just a little play on
there
words,
you go.
But it's so true. Well, one of the things about tenant screening, I've got 10 steps to tenant screening, and I'll mention them quickly. But also, what I like to provide is a little gift for your listeners, which is my rental flow chart, 10 steps from pre-screening to lease signing. And it's a PDF with the flow chart has bubbles that you can click on, and each one will take the user to a page with more detail. So that will take whoever wants to learn about tenant screening through. It's almost like a quick little course on exactly what to do from every step all the way to the lease signing. So that might be helpful. But what I'll mention,
it's fantastic.
These steps, if it's okay. I hope I don't take too long.
No, you're okay.
But thanks, Jim. So the very first step from pre-screening to lease signing would be advertising and pre-screening. And what I like to do is set up online ads. We don't have to pay for those expensive newspaper ads like I used to spend couple of $100s a weekend in the newspaper, and that's just those days are gone. But now that we have Craigslist and other online things like Trulia and Zillow, it's so much easier and cheaper. But so advertising and pre-screening. And I like to use a pre-screening prospect card, which you viewers who are listening now can click on these things when you download them and see my pre-screening questions. But once you know a little bit about the tenant applicant before you call them, before you meet them, because you may not want to call them or meet them when you see what they say, you'll have a better idea of whether it's worth it to go forward with them. So step number 2 is to schedule the showing. And this explains how to schedule the showings and best ways to set that up for yourself. 3 is to prepare for the appointment, having the rental unit show ready and applications and things that you might need and want to be ready for. And then the 4th step is showing the rental and meeting the prospect. And the 5th is handling the customer interest and listening for red flags and also knowing what not to say. Sometimes we may say things and regret them, so it's good to be kind of schooled or at least be aware of what things to avoid saying. And then the 6th step is accepting a completed rental application with the screening fee or holding fee and the deposit on the rental. And then 7th is verification of the rental application, because so many people go straight to the credit report. And because we have access and it's a lot easier now to run credit reports, and a lot of our quick check credit report customers just love ordering those credit reports and criminal background checks. But I try to warn people, don't blow your money. Don't spend money. As much as I want to make money from these people, I don't want them throwing it away either, because they could eliminate so many of these prospects just with the rental application, with a few phone calls, just to verify that they work where they say they work and that they have a bank account, or that they have a landlord reference that's the true landlord reference.
Some of them are pretty good liars. You really got to be careful when you're screening and calling landlords that you're really talking to the person you think you're calling.
Exactly. That's right. So many times I catch them now because I have a better way of doing that, but it's a very common thing where the tenants will put down a friend or a relative to pretend that they're the landlord, and they'll give a great reference. So one of the things I did, Jim, is on my essential forms list, I created years ago a form called the Landlord Reference Qualifier. And it's sort of like a little interview form that helps the screening landlord speak with the reference landlord and be able to ask certain key questions that might help him blow his cover. If it's a phony, you should be able to detect him. And
do you have an example of something that works pretty well?
Well, one very easy, common example is, hello, Mr. Landlord. I'm calling to check on the reference for so-and-so who listed you as their landlord moving out of, now say the address is 1234 Main Street. You might just want to say 124 Main Street, or you just change the numbers around slightly.
Mix it up a little.
And the real landlord is going to correct you on something like that. And when they don't correct you, and then you could verify it again, and when they don't correct, say, so just to get things straight, so you are the owner and the landlord of 124 Main Street, and then, you give them a chance to fix it.
Right.
If they don't, that's, knowledge.
That's a great tip.
You may have a phony there. But also,
that's a great tip. So you just basically it's like turning the tables upside down, John. I love it because it's like you're intentionally giving them bad information and giving them the opportunity to correct it.
Right, exactly. exactly. And if they're the real person, they know the address of their own rental property. If they're a phony, they're not even going to detect it, and they're just going to be more interested in giving you a glowing reference for whoever they're covering for. So that was one of the things of verifying the rental application and the references. So eliminate them before spending money on the credit report. And then the 8th step is the credit report and maybe the criminal check. And Jim, I tell people, don't order them together. Order one first. And I recommend people order the credit report first, because we don't offer them as packages because we don't want people to waste money on a report they don't need. So if the credit report is bad, then why pay for a criminal check? So what if they're criminals? Why care? You don't want them anymore. So that's for people who care about credit. There are the landlords who don't care about credit, and they're accepting Section 8, and of course the Section 8 applicants probably won't have good credit. But when you need good credit,
a lot of landlords, and this came in through our Facebook group, John, but a lot of landlords get a little confused on how to interpret a credit report, because many tenants that are renting have bad credit or marginal credit, and you'll see a judgment for a utility or a cell phone or medical or student loans, and it's hard to sometimes interpret the credit report. Do you have any tips on good ways to do that?
Well, sure. And one of the things a lot of landlords do, which helps a little bit, but it's not very telling, really, is just looking at the credit score. And, people go by credit scores, but that doesn't really mean that much. I know some people who have never, ever had a late payment in their life, never, ever, but their credit scores are down because they have high balances, and they may not be accepted for certain types of financing.
Or they may have had an issue with student loans, and medical really trip people up a lot. I mean, I'm sure you have too. I've had tenants with me for more than 5 years that are never late, that did not have good credit when I started renting to them. And they were fine for over 5, 6, 7 years.
That's great. The credit report, it doesn't tell all. And another thing, like you mentioned, student loans, another big thing we're finding, because I get to see all these people's credit reports through QuickCheck when we send people their credit reports, and also we do credit scorecards where we have to interpret the report and give them a scorecard with a rating. And one big common thing is cell phones, Verizon, Sprint, AT&T, where people ruin their credit with the cell phone company. And it's really kind of unfair to the consumer, because what the cell phone companies are doing is, and it just happened to me recently, and we're dealing with a situation between T-Mobile and Sprint, where you switch companies, and T-Mobile says, don't worry, we're going to pay off Sprint on the phones, and we're going to pay all the termination fees. Don't worry about anything. Turn in your phones, and we'll cover Sprint for all the expenses. But then we weren't told they were going to take 60 to 90 days to compensate Sprint. So meanwhile, Sprint hits your bill with all these termination fees and charges for the phones and everything like that, and inflates the bill to a huge bill. And if you don't pay it, they're going to put it in collection while you're waiting for your payment for 90 days. So I see that on a lot of tenants' application or credit reports where they owe money to the phone company, and I see that. I'm learning now why that's happening. I used to think that people just didn't pay their phone bill, but they were kind of being abused by the phone company a little bit.
Wow. I wasn't even aware of that. But I definitely see student loans and medical come up all the time, and they can still be good tenants. And so you got to really read through that. But the big thing on the credit reports, one of the things I don't like to see utilities go into judgment, get judgments for utilities or judgments in general.
Yeah,
or like
judgments in general.
A car being repossessed is a red flag for me. I mean, I just don't like the fact you're going to allow that to happen.
sometimes we see on the TransUnion reports when not even the judgment, sometimes we'll see a collection with the name of a management company, so-and-so apartments, and that tells us right there that they didn't pay
they've
rent.
Been evicted. Right.
So that's a good thing to notice on the credit reports. But one
let's
thing I
go
want to
into
mention.
that a little. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, no, that's okay. I wanted to mention that on our Quick Check Credit Reports site, which is part of the Landlord Protection Agency, there is a sample credit report and also an article that says how to read a credit report. So anyone who wants to look at a guide on how to read the credit report, that's very helpful to look at on the screen.
That is a huge thing because I get that question a lot. So if you go to the LPA.com, where will you find that on there? Under the credit reports link at the top?
Yeah, on the credit reports link, when they go to Quick Check Credit Reports, they'll see on the right side there is an articles. There are articles, and if they click on the articles, they can just go to the one that says how to read a credit report.
Very, very good. Very helpful. Okay. Well, speaking of that, when things go wrong, a lot of people wonder, should I report the tenant debt? And even before that, what about evictions? What are your feelings on landlords doing their own evictions in general? And then we'll talk about that real quick.
Okay, Jim, thanks. Well, I have a couple of ways of looking at that, and there are landlords, some very, very experienced landlords who know what they're doing and they do their own evictions. But I think in the whole spectrum of things, those landlords are the minority who know the whole eviction process inside out and are used to doing it, and they're familiar with their courts and the judges and all that stuff. Somebody like Cynthia Schmidt would be great to do her own evictions because she knows the system and she wrote the book on all the different states, so she's good with that. But most of us aren't eviction lawyers. I know I'm not. And I learned the very first time that I tried to do it myself, I was pretty much put down by the judge and told that, come back with a lawyer.
And, it depends a little where you're at, too, because some states are easier than other states also.
It's true. That is true. Different states and even the different counties within the states, they vary. But I found that overall, in all the states, the bad tenants get a free attorney. When they go to court, the court will appoint them a free attorney. I never see the court appointing a free attorney for the landlord. It's always the tenant who gets a free attorney to represent them, and it's usually an attorney who is trained to beat up the landlord. So I always thought that was very unfair. So I have not
seen that here in Virginia. Usually, and I do my own evictions, which fortunately I don't have very many, but typically it seems like the tenant doesn't show up. And you get a judgment, you can go get it done. But it's easier in Virginia than it is in, say, California, New York, Illinois, and a lot of other states. But if somebody, and I like the idea of getting an eviction attorney, I really do, because as landlords, we should be focusing on building our rental portfolio, collecting rent, maintaining our property, screening tenants, and positive things. And I think let the attorneys do what they want. Do you have any tips for finding an eviction attorney? Because that's another question I get pretty regularly.
And like what you said, Jim, is absolutely right. Your time is valuable, and if you spend it as trying to, doing all the evictions yourself, it could be very, very time-consuming and a very depressing activity. While you could be moving forward and buying more properties and doing other things. But, I do have some tips. And one quick little tip is I tell people if they're looking for an eviction attorney, one nice way to find them is to go to the eviction court. If they don't have a good recommendation from another landlord or a real estate investment group that could recommend a good eviction attorney in the local area, go to the eviction court and sit in for an hour or so and watch the eviction process with the attorneys that are representing the management companies and the other landlords and see who looks like he knows what he's doing. See who's successful. And they don't even know they're auditioning for a job for you. So you just watch them and pick one out and meet them in the hallway. And then I have some questions that would be good for the landlord to ask. And that would be, one, I would say, are evictions your specialty? Find out, because some attorneys don't like evictions and they only do them if they have to. And then if that's the case, they're going to charge a lot extra money, a lot more money than they should. Right. Two would be, how many evictions do you usually do in a month? And three would be, how long does the average eviction take for you from beginning to end? So this way the landlord has an idea how much, it's going to cost them in lost rent. And then the last question would be, how fast can we have these tenants in court? And the reason that question is very important is I found that eviction attorneys that are used to doing this, and they do it all the time, they know the timetable of the courts and what day the next eviction is, and by the time the tenant is served, can they be in court by next Thursday? And that's very helpful. So an on-the-ball eviction attorney has a pretty good idea of when he can have the tenants in court. So those are my tips.
Do you find some of these eviction attorneys can also help with garnishment if needed, if you didn't want to do that piece yourself as well?
Yeah, some of them can. Some of them can help with the garnishment. I have an attorney who helped me, and I don't know how much time we have, Jim, but I'll tell you a quick little story about a tenant that owed me a lot of money. It was my first big bad eviction that cost me a lot of money because I was so gullible and believed he was going to pay. So I fell for a year's worth of stories. So I was so bad. But what happened was they took off, and I didn't know where these people went, and they owed me a lot of money in rent until the landscaper that I used on that rental property told me where the people went. So I didn't know where they worked or what to do. So I happened to know the owner of the gas station that was right near that house. And I thought maybe there's a chance that she gets gas there because it's right near their house that they moved to. So I asked him to please send her a $20 check from the service station and tell her it's a refund for overpayment and with a little apology. So, only a thief is going to take that $20 because she didn't have an overpayment. She might not have even gotten gas there, but she cashed the check. So we found her bank, and through the check being returned, and our attorney was able to seize the whole bank account, and I got my $15,000, and the attorney took his cut. And that was just a really great victory for me that time.
Well, John, you've shared a lot, and I want to make sure everybody goes over to the LPA because it's a site that I use on a regular basis. So it gets my highest recommendation for landlording. You're going to learn so much by checking this site out and linking to John in Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook as well, because he's truly a giver, and he really is revolutionizing the landlord industry as a whole. John, do you have any final tip for real estate investors and landlords you'd like to share with our success listeners today?
Jim, I would tell people that the most important thing is think about how much money and how much studying investors put into learning how to buy properties. And that's a very, very big thing, learning how to buy and how to flip and wholesale and accumulate, because I thought that was the most important thing when I got started. But I soon learned that without knowledge of how to handle tenants and how to keep your properties running smoothly, once you have them, then you can lose it all, which is what happened to me in the beginning. And it's so important to be educated not only as a real estate investor and how to accumulate properties, but education and going to seminars like yours, Jim, and subscribing to websites like yours also is so valuable for people to learn the ins and outs of this business. And as far as people who want to own rental property, I recommend they learn a little bit about it before engaging with tenants, before they have tenants that might be pulling tricks on them and making them chase their money. Learn how to get set up with good tenants from the beginning and eliminate those tenant problems along with, in the screening process. And then I would say,
I really appreciate it. Yeah.
Thank you. I would also say two other things. To use a solid landlord lease like we have, and there are other ones on other sites, but as long as it's written for the landlord, of course I recommend mine. And then the lease enforcement. And we've created forms to help enforce the lease for every occasion that we could think of. And those are the things I would really recommend, to be educated in landlording.
And it's super important, guys. Don't make the mistake I did in my early 20s. My dad was a landlord too, John, and he made it look so easy growing up. And he did it so well. But when I tried it with nothing, no systems or training, it was a tough experience. But when I came back in 10 years later, I put systems and processes. I invested in myself. I learned about landlording and screening and credit reports and leases. And it's a beautiful thing when it all comes together, because you can build a portfolio of rentals that are great assets that all your tenants are paying for. They go to work every day so they can pay your rent, and that's a very good thing. So I really appreciate your sharing today.
Oh, thank you, Jim. Like I said not long ago, it was on Facebook, I said, your rental property is the best employee you can ever have, because these properties never go to sleep. They work 24 hours, and they never get sick unless you get a bad tenant. Then they're sick.
And they'll help you tremendously on your tax return with all that depreciation. That's just a phenomenal side benefit that everybody loves in April. So there's a lot of benefits to doing it. John, thanks so much for being with us today. That's it for this very special episode of the Investor Success Podcast. Thanks again to all of our regular listeners tuning in today. It's been wonderful to spend this time with you today, and we had another amazing show with all that John was able to give us on tips for screening and credit reports. And go to thelpa.com and check that out. My name again is Jim Ingersoll, and it's been a pleasure to spend this time with you today. I have a free investing kit waiting for you if you want to go pick it up. Check out thebigmoneyinvestor.com. Thanks again, and thanks for subscribing to this podcast.
Thanks for joining us today. Be sure to share this podcast with your friends and social media contacts, and visit us online at www.bigmoneyinvestor.com.